So, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome wherever you are watching around the world. Welcome. We have a webinar today entitled From Road Risks to Road Heroes, Iron Mountain How-Tos of Creating a Best-in-Class Driver Safety Program. My name is Richard York, and I will be your host for today. I'm the Strategic Accounts Director at GreenRoad. I've been involved in telematics products, security and driver safety now for over 20 years, including GreenRoad for the last 8 years. I work out of the UK, but a lot like our guest speaker today, I operate globally. My primary role is to manage clients around the world and ensure that they're getting the most out of the opportunity they have when they purchase a safety system such as GreenRoad. Just a little bit of background on GreenRoad. We are a global company. And we are a driver safety company, providing real-time feedback to drivers as they're driving and providing a risk mitigation system for global companies everywhere. Personally, I'm always really interested to learn new ways about how companies integrate safety systems into being just part of the job, part of the DNA of the business. Not just something that is the responsibility of the health and safety team, for example. And I know in this regard that our guest today is highly expert in this particular area. So without further ado, I'd very much like to introduce our speaker today, Rory Morgan, Head of Transportation, EMEA for Iron Mountain, a global leader for storage and information management services, and I'm very proud to say an esteemed customer of GreenRoad for over 14 years. Welcome, Rory.
Thank you, Richard. Just to give you a little background, I've been in transportation for the vast majority of my working life. Initially as a driver, so trucks and lorries and vans and what have you, but I was a long distance truck driver for quite a few years back in the 80s and early 90s, UK, international, European. And I think that gave me a good grounding. So I can have a little bit of empathy for kind of guys at the coalface, if you like. The conversations I have with some of the drivers nowadays, I still insist it was a lot more difficult in my day. Less traffic, to be fair, but the vehicles you drive around in now are a lot better. But I've been into management, I've been in management for about 25 years now. Started off with 3PLs, and anyone old enough in the UK to remember BRS, British Road Services. They've morphed into XL Logistics. And I've been with Iron Mountain for just over 18 years. Various roles, predominantly just it's expanded more in respect to, I started off in the UK, then it became UK and Ireland, and then it became Western Europe, and then EMEA. But I also work with the rest of the world, so regular conversations with colleagues in North America, LATAM and Asia Pac, sharing best practice. It's good that kind of little old kind of Europe kind of gets a little bit of a say at the table with kind of North America, because we are a North American company. We've got about 40 different countries in our region, ranging from kind of the Baltics in the north, South Africa to the south, and everything in between. And I quite find it quite surreal that, you know, we've got an operation still servicing customers in Ukraine, despite being in the middle of a war zone. You know, talking to the guys, they're still thinking customer service. Huge kind of admiration for the guys. Iron Mountain are probably more renowned regarding information management, be it hard copy or digital, but there's a lot more to the business than that. We're in over 60 different countries. There's about 230,000 employees worldwide. We've got about 4,500 vehicles that augments that service. But it's also managing that data from cradle to grave, if you like. So it's storage, it's service back to the customer, but it's also secure destruction, be it of hard copy, be it of hard drives and things like that. And then lastly, we've also got our fine art division that takes us off in a completely different tangent, but from a transport perspective, still the same generic requirements from a risk and safety aspect.
Thank you, Rory. There is a lot of experience there. Um, First of all, then, just a few, just to give everyone a sense of what we're going to do. Um, I'm going to ask Rory, have a discussion with Rory, and then we are going to take Q&A. And please send through your questions, and we will address as many as we can at the end. So, Rory, thanks very much. Let's jump into our first topic. As you've described, Iron Mountain is truly a global organisation. And no doubt you've got a wide diversity of people, cultures, territories, and vehicle types. What would you say are the kind of key challenges and concerns of deploying driver safety systems of any kind across such a diverse organisation?
Yeah, I say we've got circa about 60, 65, 66 countries where we've got a footprint across the globe, but about 40 of those are within the EMEA region. And what goes with that is around 25 different languages and variances of languages as well. So that's probably the first and foremost, is an understanding. We can have something written that works very well in the UK in English. You try and translate that, there can be all sorts of misunderstandings, and it can be quite misleading. We've just done a full set of kind of safe working procedures that we're rolling out right across the region, but there's tiny little kind of differences in a sentence can throw the whole meaning out. So that's probably the basis of where we start. But then you start looking at processes for actually deploying any of the processes or the procedures, and it's getting the engagement from not only the drivers, but it's from the upstream and downstream as well, because you could have a fleet of really engaged drivers, but if their supervisor or manager isn't engaged, that potentially that can create apathy. So you need to have that engagement. Working with workers' councils. Now, workers' councils do a very good job. At times they can be quite frustrating, but our objective is reducing road risk, is increasing the safety and security of our drivers and our employees. So that's a difficult argument for them to kind of regale against, really. There's the privacy element. Is it a spy on the cab? And we say, well, we're not interested in viewing the driver and what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. We're only looking for root cause opportunities when there's an event, and use that as a coaching method to reduce risk further and work with the drivers. And it's a carrot and stick, carrot as opposed to a stick environment. You know, we're trying to cajole the drivers. We're trying to show them where they potentially get a bad habit from. If they can reduce that, then it's going to be better for them.
Thanks, Rory. That sounds really clear. So the idea is generally that you set a global standard and then adapt it using cultural nuances and adapting it to different countries. So it's kind of applicable to all.
Yeah, a bit of an example with that, Richard, is the Middle East, some parts of North Africa. You know, they have the Ramadan period where the guys are fasting, and as we all know, it's difficult to kind of keep concentration when you're feeling quite hungry, and that can be a dangerous situation when you're driving a vehicle, naturally. So it's working with the guys to see how they kind of cope with that, you know, reducing workloads, allowing a little bit more time. But it's not totally specific to those countries, because obviously we're multi-diverse population in other countries around Europe, for example. We could have pockets of that. So it needs to kind of use that as best practice and then translate that into what we may have a small pocket of drivers in the UK or in Germany or in France, wherever it may be, to work with them and get an understanding. And again, the more you engage people, the more you work with people, the better the results.
So thanks, Rory. What you've described there, definitely a very multifaceted approach to driver safety. What we do know is that these things never stand still. And I was wondering if you could share what your kind of continuous improvement methodology is for managing driver safety.
Yeah, something I've always said over the years. There's no silver bullet here. You can't deploy one particular avenue of safety without having other contributory kind of processes that kind of work together and collaborate. Telematics and driver behavior systems, fantastic. But if you don't work with the drivers, if I'm a driver and I'm not getting a great score, and Richard, you say to me, Rory, you've got to improve, I need to know how I can improve. What coaching methods can you provide? What sort of guides? Looking at root causes, that sort of thing. It's also the kind of the element of researching best practice. What works best for your particular environment? There isn't a kind of hard and fast answer to that. There are different environments. The majority of our demographic is urban areas. So we look at, fatigue isn't a big problem for us because the drivers are in and out of the vehicles on a regular basis. Tiredness to a degree, yes, mental and physical, probably more mental. Compare that to an operation where you're up and down the motorways. Now fatigue there becomes more of a problem. And now we have kind of vehicles moving around at night, doing shuttles between locations. So that's an area. So it's actually catering for your audience and not having a hard and fast set kind of process. Some of the elements that we bring in is working with kind of the data. You've got to work with the data. I've always said, and a mantra of mine is, if you don't measure it, you can't manage it. So use that data. Look for the root cause. If there's something that's trending, what's causing that? Are we getting a lot of kind of directional kind of changes, events within GreenRoad? What's causing that? Is it a driver kind of driving with one hand on the gear lever, right or left, depending which country you're in, naturally? But then at the end of the day, it's also the debrief. Now, we have a very robust process in place where every driver will be debriefed when they return from their duty. Now, we can start that debrief before they get back, because looking through the systems, be it internal processes, customer service, but also GreenRoad. And then what we try and to kind of encourage the drivers is we can have a fast lane and a slow lane. Fast lane is everything seems okay, Richard. Had a good day. Anything you want to say? No, I'm fine. Great. Thank you. See you tomorrow morning. Now, if Richard's got a poorer score on GreenRoad, for example, or had an event, or there's been a customer kind of situation where the customer wants to order something, or they've asked questions, then it's the slow lane, and we kind of, have those conversations. But the driver debrief is the safety net, and nothing should get through that.
So, Rory, in that last answer, you mentioned fleet safety data. And I was wondering, how do you actually use the fleet safety data to kind of monitor and drive the health and safety decisions that you make?
Yeah, we have a lot of global benchmarking, and we use incidents per mile or kilometre, as the case may be. That gives a good overview because it's not dependent on the size of the fleet. Whether you've got one vehicle or you've got 100 vehicles, that distance travelled will have an effect on that KPI ratio. We also have kind of weekly and monthly reports. I created a World Cup, if you like, a few years ago, where we have every country within GreenRoad, and we have a GreenRoad league.
An opportunity to win something.
Absolutely. But that creates a little bit of kind of competitiveness, a little bit of fun, but equally nobody wants to see themselves lower down the table. Now, this is we're probably guilty of our own success here. And the recent one I did for June, the Czech Republic, or Czechia, and a score of 11 within GreenRoad, which is pretty good, but
Yeah,
they were
very
16th in their league. So, we've just got to be careful that we don't kind of create a potential that will say, well, we're doing as well as we can, but we can't improve. So it's, again, we have calls, get these clusters together so they can talk through, rather than Rory Morgan telling them and sitting in his ivory tower and saying, look, this is the best way to kind of achieve good results within GreenRoad or incident management. We let other kind of successful operations talk through, well, we did this and we tried that, and this is how we kind of talk with our drivers and things like that. It's also that remedial approach. So if a driver isn't achieving what the objectives or the targets that we set out, we try to kind of support them through coaching, remedial training, guides and tips, obviously all translated into local languages wherever it is. And a good example of that is when we first deployed UK speed by speed zone with GreenRoad a number of years ago. We were quite horrified that we were seeing kind of, this is the speed by the travel speed on a particular road, not a top speed. And we were quite horrified that I think we were in the region of about 2,000 per week. So how we approached that was, so basically we took out every driver who'd scored or had more than 10 events, worked with those drivers, and over a period of time that came down to 5, came down to 2. And now if we probably average between 15 and 30 events total. So we've come down from over 2,000 a few years ago to, we get barely a handful of speeding events now. And that kind of relays back to how the drivers, it becomes a mindset and a default driving process for the drivers. That's how they default into their driving behaviors. They do it subconsciously now. We deployed cameras a couple of years ago, and that's taken us to a new level. Yeah. Simply because we've got the inward and the outward. It supports the driver, it defends the driver if if we have a collision and they are kind of totally blameless. It provides that sort of information. But also where we have an event, it gives us the opportunity of understanding a little bit of the root cause. Is a driver driving with one-handed, like I said before? Are they pulling away and then putting the seatbelt on as they're pulling away? Are they looking at the notes? Are they distracted by something out on the road? And we've always maintained, when you're driving, that is the 100% priority. And over the years, we've seen huge benefits. In the first 7 or 8 years, we reduced our vehicle incidents in the UK and Ireland by over 90%. With that came the cost, obviously, kind of cost reduction for bent metal, but also 36% reduction over that period of time in premiums from our insurers. The immediate kind of ROI just tends to be on fuel efficiency, because there is a direct correlation between defensive driving, safer driving, and fuel efficiency, simply because you're reading the road ahead, you're looking for the hazards. Yeah. You're not waiting for those lights to change to red. You know they're going to change to red, and you adapt accordingly. And generally, when we deploy, we suggest about 8% fuel efficiency improvement. Some countries have knocked that clean out the park. I think Brazil holds the record, and they got about 15%. And then there's the other slower kind of benefits that come over the years. I think we were hitting about 78, 80% on damage cost reduction over that same sort of period of time. So that's how we kind of sell this. There's a benefit in safety and risk reduction, but there's also something there to keep the financial director happy as well.
Always important, always important. And finally, Rory, I don't know about you, but I often meet managers in an organisation who are considering the use of in-vehicle driver safety technology systems, but they just don't really know where to start. or they're not been yet convinced, or perhaps struggling to get the message across to their organizations. What would your message be to those people?
Yeah, I'm a bit long in the tooth now. I mean, my retirement date's getting closer and closer, but I just couldn't envisage trying to run a transport operation or a fleet management team without telematics stroke driver behavior. I think it's the benefits that we see from it, the data that we can pull from it. I mean, you can get data overload naturally, but what we've seen with certainly with the GreenRoad system, and this is what we try and employ elsewhere with our own internal systems as well, is making them user friendly. Make them too complicated, then you can just get blown away. Make them kind of fairly kind of a standard dashboard that you can see, it tells you a story, and then you can drill in as required. Now, I mentioned earlier on that we have that GreenRoad World Cup where we have the country with a score, but we don't want to get lost in the weeds here and just say, oh, we've got a score of 4 or 5 for a particular country, and then light the cigar and put a feet up on the desk. Within that country, you could have several drivers achieving excellent scores, 0s, 2s, 3s, etc. But equally, you could have a small pocket who are not scoring so well. And that, if we go back to my original kind of comment where we said the objective is to reduce risk, there's still an opportunity to wring a little bit of more water out of that sponge, if you like. Yes. Because those guys who are scoring the higher scores, that's where you start to work down. Now, you've also got to have actionable insights as well. It's, I mentioned kind of, measuring and managing the data. You've got to be able to work upstream and downstream. This isn't just the driver. The driver's the priority, but it's all those other elements as well. It's customer service. If a driver is kind of feeling a lot better about themselves, they're less stressed in kind of congested traffic, etc. They're not worrying about timing. All our routes are routed through a system. So, they're not fighting against the clock, thinking I've got to get there for such and such a time. It's routed for them so they can remain as calm as possible. The natural demeanor is going to be better for customers. And the reduction in risk means that we've improved the opportunity of them being there on time, but being there at all, naturally. We use the carrot as opposed to the stick. So we do try to recognise our drivers for everything they do, not just within the GreenRoad scores, customer service, internal process. But it's also an element of this cost avoidance versus cost saving. Now, incident management is cost avoidance. And that's a difficult conversation with the finance director, because they can't see something coming off the bottom line that they can't, it's not black and white. So that's where we bring in the element of the fuel saving. That's where you get your return on your investment very, very quickly. But then there's the other element of duty of care and the reputational situation. Now, if you have a serious incident and you're proved to be kind of at fault potentially, and that goes across social media, goes across the kind of the press, etc., that can be hugely damaging, not only from a business perspective, but also recruitment and retention of your drivers. Now, we're all kind of fishing in a very shallow pond when it comes to drivers. So you need to be able to kind of offer the best possible kind of role and position as you can. It's not always to do with money, that and salary. That obviously has an impact, but it's also the driver knowing that I'm working for a company that's got a duty of care and he's going to try and look after me. It's going to put me in safer vehicles, regularly kind of updated, innovative, all the new innovations on the market, etc., etc. And then finally, kind of you work with the drivers and you get that feedback, if you like. So it's a process of, a few years ago, we invited a group of drivers to visit our afterfit bodybuild company to say where they wanted kind of grab handles, where they needed a step into the vehicle and things like that. I can't say that. I can think of a good idea, but those are the guys that are in and out of those vehicles as well. But also we ask for general feedback. And one I do recall, it's quite amusing really, that guy said, since I've been driving with GreenRoad and I've got used to the kind of the process, I've seen that become my kind of general demeanor now. And I've seen driving my own personal car, fuel efficiency improve. He said, I've got to the point now, I'm trying to coach my wife to drive in the same sort of kind of standard, if you like. So my comment to him was, well, not only do we have some of the safest drivers on the road, we've also got some of the bravest drivers on the road as well.
Yeah, I would probably consider that a high-risk activity.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So thank you very much, Rory, for sharing all those valuable insights and experiences. You've been extremely generous with your experience and time there. And it's obvious that all of these things are run throughout your organization and are really, really deep into the DNA of business. I personally have learned a lot. So thank you very much. We're now going to take some questions from attendees. Please write your questions in the chat and we'll be happy to answer as many time allows. And once again, thank you very much, Rory.
You're welcome.
Right. Well, there are a few great questions that have come in, Rory. So people are testing us today. First question, which I think is from one of my own customers, actually. So I hope we can provide a good answer. Which key KPIs do you track to measure the success of your driver safety initiatives?
Yeah, good question. Well, the obvious one is that the quantity of vehicle incidents, naturally. And it depends on the size of your fleet, of course. Bigger fleet, more incidents, the ratio will be kind of larger. But the other element is, as we've kind of reduced year on year the number of incidents we have, we also check what the severity is. And we found pretty soon, within 2 or 3 years of kind of putting out the factors that we included in our kind of goal to kind of reduce risk. And that was that as the severity reduced, we got more and more of those frustrating little bumps and bangs of reversing into a gate post, clipping a wing mirror. So we had to do something about those. Now, they're preferable, naturally, compared with a high impact. But we put out a complete new training mechanism around slow speed maneuvers to try and reduce those, because things like GreenRoad will help you on the overall driving aspect, but not so much when you're driving around a yard or at 5 miles an hour.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I could add to that, I think just wearing my GreenRoad hat for a minute, I think I quite like the idea that the GreenRoad safety scores are sort of a universal scoring mechanism. So it's a great leveler. So everyone can see it, from either the CEO looking at their whole company right down to an individual driver looking at their own performance. So yeah, very good question. Very good question. Okay, here's another one. What new technologies and trends do you think are the most promising?
I do like the cameras, particularly the inward and the outward facing. A little bit challenging getting them into countries. We have them across the entire UK fleet, but more of a challenge with the workers' councils in other countries. But that obviously provides us with opportunities, as I referenced earlier, regarding kind of when there's an incident. But it gives us that increased opportunity for root cause understanding. Is it a driver driving with one hand? Is it a driver being distracted by other elements and those sort of things? So I really like the camera and the development of the camera. We're now looking obviously at checking the driver for fatigue, the drooping eyes or the eyelids, the kind of the loss of attention and the alerts that come through that are being proactive. So I'm really keen on the cameras.
Okay, thanks. And another one. This is about incentives or recognition programs. So, I know you've already mentioned the World Cup. Are there any other incentives or recognition programs that you have in place to motivate safe driving behaviour?
Yeah, there's several. I mean, we tend to kind of have a generic one right across the region, but also allow the countries to do their own thing, depending on what their budget requirements are. But we do have that recognition. We try and kind of definitely use internal communications, pin badges, driver of the month, driver of the year, the old Amazon vouchers. There are other suppliers out there, naturally, he hastens to add, and little elements like that. But I think what possibly kind of not so much reward and recognition, but something that ties into that. And this is an example for those people who are in the UK and know how driving license endorsements work. Our driver fleet, at the moment, we've got 92% of our driver fleet have got 0 points on the licenses. So 0 endorsements. Another 4% have got 3 points. So that leaves just 4% have got 3 points or more. Yeah. And what that's telling us is, way back when I started this conversation with you and I said, mindset, default driving process, it tells us that the drivers are actually driving their own vehicles the same way they're driving Iron Mountain's vehicles. So that kind of safety kind of process is broadening across the kind of the road, if you like.
And from your example at the end, just a minute ago, all about the gentleman who's trying to influence his wife to drive more safely as well.
Yeah, well, yeah.
And the family. I think from talking to you, Rory, and other customers, there's kind of like two schools of thought on incentives. There are people in the industry who think absolutely not. Safety is the bare minimum standard. It's part of the operating procedures, and it's just bare minimum. You shouldn't really reward standardized driving safety behavior, and they kind of give out sort of on the spot reward vouchers for people who go over and above. And then there's other customers who see it as link it to other KPIs and other bonus schemes and everything. But I think what the commonality is that we've both seen is little and often and broadly providing encouragement and positivity in a fair and reasonable environment seems to sort of generate the most success, I think. So
I think you're right, Richard. I mean, it has to be the full package. It's not just, yes, the GreenRoad kind of element comes in, but it's customer service, it's all the internal process. And people have asked me before, have we ever disciplined and dismissed a driver based on their GreenRoad scores? The honest answer is no. Sure. It will be a factor, because if they're not very good at a certain kind of area of expertise where they should be, then the chances are they're not very good in several other areas as well.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Another question. The industry hot topic, driver fatigue. What measures do you take to address driver fatigue and prevent collisions caused by tiredness?
Yeah, I mean, our demographic is predominantly an urban environment, simply because of what we do. We do have vehicles that travel longer distances, and we do have kind of like a lot of night movements as well, which is the greatest area. So the cameras, as I referenced earlier on about innovation, is a huge boon to us because it's proactive. It's alerting the driver if they're beginning to kind of tire. But the other elements, I think, is that we make sure that all our kind of routes and all our planning to service our customers goes through a routing system, and that plans in rest breaks. And our internal system on our handheld scanners are insistent that drivers have to take those breaks. So we're not lining them up. It's not this, get the job done as quickly as possible, I can get home and therefore work through my rest break. They have to take that rest break and have to be seen to be taking that rest break. So they have to go off clock, if you like. And if they don't, then going back to the debrief process, that will capture any driver who's just trying to kind of take a few shortcuts, if you like, and say, this isn't the way we do it. Your break is planned in. Okay, you may have to drive 10 minutes further because you got caught in traffic to find somewhere suitable to park, but it's all planned in.
A question that we've got from somebody called Tony, and I think it's a great question for you, Rory, because you've been a long-term customer of GreenRoad. I'm sure that this has come up more than once, but Tony asks, how do you keep drivers engaged who routinely have good safety scores?
Oh, good question. Yeah, I mean, we have kind of the league tables, and it's, the reward and recognition scenario, but certainly something that we've GreenRoad introduced, and we've taken it to another level, and we've included internal process as well, is that you can get the pin badge and the certificate for being a GreenRoad elite driver. And I think that's 500 hours driving time for the previous 12 calendar months. And you'll get a pin badge. But if you do it a second year, you go from a bronze to a silver to a gold to a platinum. And a lot of the drivers are really, really keen to be, and it does get customers asking, oh, what's the badge? What's an elite driver? What's all that about? And they puff their chests out quite naturally, and great. So it's that old adage, particularly the males amongst us. Nobody wants to be told that they're a poor driver. And if these guys can prove that, yes, I am a safer driver, not safe because he will never be safe, but safer, then it's a great kind of promotion, if you like. And again, internal communication. Plenty of photographs. We have an internal, almost like a Facebook page as well, that we can advertise if somebody gets a badge, if somebody does something good, etc., etc.
I always say to customers I say, if you see a fleet elite driver around the place, shake them by the hand. And I think actually, to be honest, I always sort of say to customers that if you are a fleet elite driver, you're in the top 8% of the GreenRoad global driving population. So I think actually sometimes people think of their driving world as if they're part of an individual organisation or a depot or a division or a country or a company. But actually, to be honest, we always sort of say, no, you're actually being benchmarked against people in New York, San Francisco, Australia. It's a globally recognised standard. I think anyone who's fleet elite should be extremely proud. There's a question in from Philip. I think this is a kind of good question, Rory, in as much as probably can answer because of the way that you handle individual countries and depots. But Philip's asking, is there any guidance you could give regards benchmarking for a relatively small fleet of approximately 40 vehicles?
Yeah, I mean, we've got differing kind of size of fleets across the 35-40 countries that we've got in EMEA. Some of those countries may only have one vehicle. Places like Latvia and Estonia and small operations like that. So, but if you've only got 40 vehicles and they're all in one country, then what we've done, certainly in the UK, where we've got multiple locations and the larger countries, Germany, France, and what have you, we have those locations almost like a league table for those locations. So I mentioned earlier, we have a World Cup by country, but then we go down to the next level down, we'll have a league table by operation. So it could be London versus Bristol versus Manchester versus Birmingham. And that kind of, gets a little bit of the juices flowing. The team in Birmingham will want to try and kind of beat the team in Manchester, and they can share what they're doing. So if Manchester are doing really, really well, they can share some of their good ideas and their best practice with that team in Birmingham or London. And it just adds a little bit of a healthy competition as well. I mean, we don't advertise which drivers are the worst, naturally, but we do kind of recognise those drivers who are at the top. And something that we found out, and I think you referenced it earlier on, you get a good score, but don't be confident that that score's the be-all and end-all. You could have a great score and think everything's okay, but you've got to look at there may be a driver hidden away there who's not getting a very good score when it comes to GreenRoad, and how can they support? If they're amenable, get another driver to support them, talk them through how they kind of work around, directional change or lane handling or whatever it may be.
Well, Rory, thank you very, very much for your time today. I personally have learnt a lot, and I really appreciate everyone who's joined from around the world. I hope you found this webinar as insightful and interesting as I have. And thank you very much. And I hope everyone has a great day.